Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrien Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, let's rewind the clock just a bit to the end of last week. The dots that you see over there in the map that's in the background, those represent the severe weather reports we had on Halloween night. In total, we are almost at 400 separate reports, 392 of which are coming from severe winds, and 7 are tornadoes. And I know a lot of us that are kind of east of the Raleigh-Durham area were able to get the trick-or-treating in before the severe weather got there. But as these storms came through, they produced some incredibly strong winds, some very brief downpours, and even some of the storms along this line segment were rotating, which is why we do have a few reports. You can see the red dots over there on the right of tornadoes. Now, the rainfall that we got from this particular system added to our weekly total last week, and we can see here that over the last 7 days, some parts of North and South Carolina picked up several inches of rainfall, specifically right there along the Appalachian Mountains. Rainfall amounts, of course, kind of waned as we got over toward the Piedmont and the Atlantic coastal plain here, with some locations they're actually getting missed by some of the heavier rainfall from these storms, maybe only picking up less than 1/3 of an inch in total. But overall, the map that you're seeing here really signifies the greater pattern change that we had been in for so long, and that was one that featured a big ridge that sat over this area. Now we see that we are able to get precipitation systems through this region, bringing in a lot of very heavy rainfall, and it's working hard on eliminating drought in this area, but unfortunately it's coming at harvest time for a lot of the crops that we grow here in the Carolinas, stretching down through the southeast. Now, certainly after that system went through, things cleared out for the weekend. Just looking at our last 3 days of precipitation here, what we need to be doing in this video is understanding where we're going with temperatures and what we're expecting for precipitation throughout the rest of this week here in the Carolinas. Now, over the weekend, we were getting quite concerned because the GFS model came out and threw, a pretty amazing storm system at us. Now, here's the good news. What you're about to see is no longer in the forecast, but I just want to show you what our models sometimes do when we get out past about day 10, where predictability gets rather low. You can see that over here on our height anomaly map, we had these white colors showing up. That means it was off my color bar in terms of how deep this trough was. And as it produced this huge low pressure system that sat here over the Great Lakes, it was going to be bringing a major severe weather outbreak throughout the evening hours on Monday, the 11th, through early morning on Tuesday through the Carolinas. And in addition to that, on the back side of this system, we were going to have some extremely cold air piling up snow in the Appalachian Mountains, along with almost hurricane force winds. Now, I don't know what got the GFS going off on this tangent, but boy, I'm glad that this is no longer in the forecast, because would this system have gone through where it was supposed to go through? I think Gordon Lightfoot could have written another version of The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, because this is one of those big November storms that often goes over the Great Lakes. So if you know the song I'm talking about, I bet you're going to want to go listen to it later on today. It's a great song. Okay, let's get in and take a look at what's changed. You see, over the last month, we've had a pattern in the North Pacific that has been split for the most part, and it's allowed for a much deeper trough to be developing here in the western part of the United States. And that, up until Halloween, kept much of the Carolinas on the warmer side of things. But that cold air has finally pushed through, and we had a cooler weekend because of it. Now, the low that was sitting here has now since migrated, or slowly continuing to migrate here, to now set up between the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay. And we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean both in the near term and in the long-term forecast? Because this is what the jet stream pattern looks like right now. It is really kinked up in the Gulf of Alaska, but then there's a broad sweeping trough that is sitting right here. And that is where our upper level low is currently positioned. Now, interestingly enough, it's these little features you see here, these two little troughs, that later on this week might give us a chance for some precipitation over here in the Carolinas. But what this upper level flow pattern means is this is going to be warm along the west coast and multiple fronts that keep sweeping down here on the convergent side of this jet stream right in through here. So we need to take a look and see how long this pattern is going to stick around, because right now this morning we certainly have our frost advisories and our freeze warnings out for parts of the Carolinas. And as of about 4:30 in the morning, I went out and took a look here at what some of those temperatures are. And you can pause the video, and you should be watching this, full screen and at high resolution here. But we can see the locations that did dip down into that, those temperatures there right at 32 or below. So again, this is just a snapshot at about 5:30 in the morning here, East Coast time. So some pretty chilly early morning temperatures for us, some of the first frost to get over into this area. Now, like I said, our pattern over the next 5 days is going to be featuring a deeper upper level low here and a lot of little clipper systems that come around it. And each one of them pushes down a front that will be making its way over toward the Carolinas. So when we look at it on the whole, we're talking about near average to slight cooler bias for the Carolinas over the coming days here, with much colder air to the north and west. In the near term, what are we watching in terms of precipitation? Well, maybe later on in the day today on Monday, getting into Monday evening, some widely scattered showers. See them there? They're kind of coming around a bigger high pressure cell that's off the page. And as it does so, it could be bringing in some light scattered rain here throughout the afternoon and evening, and really in the overnight hours getting into early Tuesday morning. We do see that by the time we get into Tuesday midday, a lot of those showers have kind of moved off and higher atmospheric pressure starts to build in. And that high pressure cell right there is one I want to talk about here in a few minutes. So we're going to come back to that. First, I at least want to show you what the GFS is showing up for precipitation over the next 5 days. So this gets us out to Friday evening, and what the European model is saying. And for the states immediately to the west of North and South Carolina, I want you to notice this. The GFS has a band of precipitation here and here, and the European only has the northern branch. The European is a much drier model for the Carolinas as we look out over the next 5 days, with the GFS possibly bringing in some more rain to South Carolina and southern parts of North Carolina. And we're not talking about much. We're talking about general rainfall amounts here less than 1/2 inch as we get through the end of this week. But the trough that was sitting here over the southwest, well, the GFS digs a little bit deeper, drawing in more moisture here that can come down to the southern part and get into the southern parts here of the Carolinas, whereas the European model takes that wave, flattens it out, and then races it on off to the north and east, actually producing snow here in the northeast. So overall, other than the chance of rain later on today and Monday, getting into early Tuesday morning, we have a relatively drier and cooler week that is on tap, and we're going to be watching here toward the end of this week for more precipitation. Let me show you when that's going to arrive by going straight to the operational European model. Let's pause it right here. We've seen through Wednesday morning, this is where that big high pressure cell begins to take shape. Now we're going to watch 3 things. This high, and also it's not easily seen, but there is a shortwave trough into this area. Now what happens is, this is Wednesday, still high pressure, drier conditions. Same thing on Thursday. This is where the 3 features are working together. See, our first high pressure cell is sitting here. The second one is here, and the third is that trough that's now pushing into Texas. So this is where the broader shield of precipitation begins to take shape by Thursday morning. It's fed on the flow around this high, and the frontal boundary is created on the flow around that high. It comes around both of them clockwise. Now what do we see? We see by Thursday afternoon and evening that this particular system could be moving up toward parts of the, Ohio River Valley, getting into parts of Pennsylvania, New York, with some cold enough air to have some snow. We're going to have to watch for Thursday night into Friday morning for our next chance at precipitation coming through the Carolinas. The European model right now not bringing too much in, but I'm just going to say it's toward the end of this week that we have our next chance. Now after that, high pressure moves in and it sets up shop all the way through our weekend. And we're going to have to talk next week about the systems that might be forming in the northeast, because at this point, the uncertainty is too high for me to give you any sort of a guarantee on what's coming through there. So let's take a look at it from a little bit different perspective. This is where the uncertainty is coming in. It's not only the European model versus the GFS, but it's also the individual model runs in their ensemble form that's problematic here. But I'm going to take you out to Monday the 11th. Now, the GFS, if you notice here, has this deep trough sitting right in this area. And this would be the type of trough that produces one of those coastal lows that races up the East Coast and produces a lot of very, very heavy rain, very windy conditions, a lot of coastal beach erosion, and just nasty overall problems for the eastern part of the United States. Well, the GFS has got its troughs tucked way up here from basically the Hudson Bay over toward the Canadian Maritimes, and just a weaker, a broader trough feature that sweeps through the East Coast and down toward the Gulf Coast. They do both agree on the bigger ridge out west, but it's the progress and timing of this event next week, early next week, that we're going to have to really kind of hone in on throughout this week. Now look at what the differences are. This is only week 2 from the GFS and only week 2 from the European. We're looking at the ensembles here. With the GFS leaving that much broader trough, yep, we're able to bring in more moisture. But remember, the European has that big deep trough sitting here, which brings up this big coastal low around its edge. So both of them bringing us wetter weather threats into next week for the Carolinas. We're going to watch this one very, very carefully as we get into early next week. So look forward to my update next Monday morning. In addition to that, as we try to understand how long this pattern is going to last, well, the polar vortex, we're going way up here to the top of the troposphere and to the base of the stratosphere. The polar vortex has been elongated in this direction. And we can see over here in this animation on the right that when we get out to about the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, we do get 2 areas on each side. One area of high pressure here, another one of higher pressure there, and the polar vortex extends between the two. Now, why start talking about this? Well, this is our first real disruption of the polar vortex this year. And what it means in our forecast is it's going to keep the cold air coming around the backside of that trough, which means frequent visits of it as we get out into that 6 to 10 day time period. That's the GFS on the left. European is over here on the right, and you see a very, very similar story. So we're going into a cold, end of the first week and second week of this month. Getting us all the way out to the 19th, we don't see much of a pattern change. While the west coast is warming up, this colder air here tucked in behind that deeper trough that's slowly migrating to become south of the Hudson Bay, south of Greenland, it is going to keep the colder air in place. So anticipate colder than average weather at least through the 3rd week of this month. This currently seems to be the best projections we've got, okay? Good model agreement here. Just to finish your video up, I want to take you down to South America. You can notice here on both the European and the GFS maps that we're bringing in quite a bit of precipitation into some places in South America that have been very dry. A lot of this has to do with the strength of the monsoon. Remember, the monsoonal flow comes around like this, and it's fed on what's called a low-level jet that comes right here off of this part of the Andes Mountains. In addition to that, this week we're going to be seeing multiple areas of higher atmospheric pressure setting here. And remember, in the southern hemisphere, the air flows around high pressure centers in a counterclockwise direction. This is enhancing in this area low-level convergence, making more rainfall. So this is kind of the first widespread meaningful rainfall for a big section of Brazil's growing area. It's only the eastern sections of Brazil's growing areas that are still looking to be dry. So again, we're nowhere near the planting pace we were a year ago in most of the Brazilian states, and there's still some places that have yet to start. But this pressure will be primarily on the second crop, which will be a corn and cotton crop. So we're going to keep an eye on this as we progress throughout our fall and early winter and their late spring and early summer. And we'll keep you updated each week, okay? With that, we'll go and wrap it up right here. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions want to thank you for your attention. Hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next Monday. Thank you.